Okay, I'm going.
Are you in are you in a good headspace to talk to me today? Like, if there's one thing I'm really aware of, it's that you have so many things going on.
I do, but I want to force myself to get into a good headspace to talk to you. Yeah, or else what? Yeah, or else I will just continue doing the same thing that I would be doing, which is probably not actually productive. It's probably get on Twitter and be upset about things. It's amazing when you have a lot of stuff to do that you can still fall back on those sort of behavioral tics that we all have, and I've been doing that a lot in the last 2 days, and I want to get out of it.
Well, I mean, it's funny because I just came off this wedding, and so for a week, I just shut everything out, and I'm not a social media person anyway. You may have noticed that I mean, one of the reasons it's fascinating for me to talk with you is because you're so entrepreneurial and you do all these things that have millions of people involved in them. And I have no facility for that. I haven't figured out how to even do, I can't keep up with any of it. But one of the things I have noticed is that even at this wedding, I watched some of the younger people and they couldn't stop themselves from stepping out of the moment that they were in to check on what everybody else was doing elsewhere. And I'm starting to realize in a deeper way the difficulty that sometimes people that are really into this social media stuff have with being present in any given moment. And it sounds like...
Yeah, I just returned from a trip to Amsterdam where I had a convention that I was running that was very amazing and exciting, and I met a bunch of people I've never met before who are doing really cool things, and I got to meet a bunch of fans. And then I had 7 days afterward to just spend time with me and my wife and my 6-month-old son going around this really unique, interesting place, learning about stuff, interfacing with people who aren't like me, and talking to people. And Amsterdam is great because it's not just Dutch people, it's German people and French people and people from Africa, and it's all over.
Oh, yeah.
And so just having, and also just wanting to make the most of every moment while we were there, because it was a really short thing. So getting up really early, even if the baby didn't sleep good, and going out and doing all of the things that we had planned to do, and seeing amazing stuff that we are very lucky to be able to see. And then I kind of get back to Montana, which I love. I love it here, and I love my life here. And there's a little bit of all that charging through life that I'd been doing for the past 10 days was okay, we can take a breath and relax. But at the same time, then it's well, what is the reason to do stuff? And so I'm only doing the stuff that's on my schedule. And during the time when I'm not doing this, during the times when I'm not scheduled, I'm probably not spending as much time trying to live good, to do good things in the moment. And I'm just sort of well, I can just relax. And so I'm going to watch this vacuous TV show, and I'm going to look at this argument that people are having on Twitter and be frustrated with my colleagues and worry about work and not actually do anything about the worry. And it's this thing that I've noticed with my life in general, where I have when I have big fun experiences, I almost always have a little crash afterward where I am more likely to be, a little bit under spirits, whatever. I don't want to say depressed, because it's not depression, but it is, less. And it's just it's almost sort of I had this wonderful crash. Yeah, I had this wonderful joy of humanity, seeing all of the things that people have done, and then, I don't know.
Have you ever seen that Louis C.K. piece where Louis C.K. is talking to Conan O'Brien about cell phones and why he doesn't let his daughter have one? And he tells this story of being on the highway and something happens, a song comes on the radio, and he gets really sad. He ends up pulling over to the side of the highway and just crying, and he's so upset. And he says, the temptation was to pull out his phone to connect with somebody to avoid that emotion by distracting himself. And he says, but what's interesting is he says is that that pain, that sadness, in a sense, kind of left room, and then a good feeling can rush in after it. And you go like, I'm alive, and be grateful for things. Well, I think it works in reverse too, that sometimes you have this really wonderful experience, but when it's over, it does like it leaves room for sadness to kind of rush in and fill that space. And I'm not sure that, when we came home from this wedding, we sat down on the couch and we were so happy with all that had gone on. And my wife then burst into tears and she cried for about an hour because it was over. And then she fell asleep. And I don't know that that's a bad thing. I don't know and in some ways, I think that's one of the dangers of all the distraction stuff is that, after the trip from Amsterdam, it might have been good if you'd have just had a little while to just be sad without having it get focused on all the, it might have been a briefer, but also maybe a more powerful and more cleansing experience to just be sad rather than to like be sad in the context of all these distractions and all that other stuff.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of like, I knew it was coming, and so I was trying to fill things up and be like, okay, let's move and keep going. But there's also, like I definitely, there are moments when I see the sadness coming, or I see, like there's a negative thought, and my subconscious is like aware of it without my consciousness even really quite knowing it's there. Yeah. And I'm like, quick, do something quick before it comes at you, which is not healthy, I don't think. And I also felt like an immediate, like, I felt like I could do anything the day I got back. And then like 2 days after that, I felt like I could do kind of
You couldn't
nothing.
do anything. You could do nothing.
And there was so much stuff that I had to do. And I have gotten myself in a situation where I'm not capable of doing how could I ever be good enough to warrant the success that I've had, and also to keep people employed, because I've got like a bunch of employees to keep the food on their tables as well as mine. And, am I, getting behind on, because media on the internet moves so fast? Am I losing traction? Are all these other companies getting much bigger than my company? And am I just sort of, this little afterthought that's an interesting thing, but is probably just going to exist for a few years and then go away, when like that would be, a really unpleasant experience for that to go away. Not because like losing it would be bad. There's a part of me that's like, I'd be fine, just having a normal job. But all the people who work on this stuff, all the people who love the stuff, I really want to make sure that it keeps going. And I feel sometimes that if I'm not thinking about it all the time, then I'm letting everyone down.
And that's, part of that's the game that you're in, the social media and because there is this fear, if you step away from it second, it's moving so fast that it'll sort of race ahead without you. My son, for a time, was partnered with one of the biggest Vine stars. A friend of ours who, when Vine was a platform and young people were making these 6-second videos.
I'm aware of Vine. Oh, I guess you're explaining maybe to the audience as well.
Screw you. Yeah. All right. So screw you. All right. Because I'm the only one who's like, I didn't know what it was. Like I had to have it explained to me. And it's on your cell phone. You don't even get it on your computer. But this guy, every second of every day, was checking to see how each video was doing and it was insane. It was insane making. And I thought, once you catch that tiger by the tail, I don't know how you ever let go of it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, I've seen people let go of it, intentionally and being forced to, because the tiger was headed somewhere else. But I guess the question is, I basically just finished writing a novel about this, about a person who is successful and can't, and like then will do basically anything to keep a hold of it. because once it starts slipping away, then you're like, well, what am I? What
And
is my value?
And how's your autobiography doing? Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it worked a lot better as a novel because it would have been so like self-congratulatory, and also I feel like you know, like first world problem whiny.
Yeah.
If I had written that as like, here's my story. It's so hard to be an internet celebrity.
You know, it's so funny for me because I have spent most of my life surrounded by failures, and people that are not doing well. I don't know if you know this, but like before I moved to California, I spent the last 20 some years working in inner city ghettos with people that were just on the edge. And so what's funny is that I can't imagine being, and I myself sort of squandered an Ivy League education and a tremendous sort of family background and a famous father. And also I squandered all of those resources multiple times over and like managed to like, pull defeat out of the jaws of victory over and over again.
I don't know that there's anyone who knows you who would agree with that statement. And I will say that fame and success is such a weird thing because to me, you are far more famous than your father. Because I have no idea who that guy is.
Yes, well, I guess you just didn't spend enough time in the center of the evangelical community. But the weird thing about it is that financially, I have not all the good work that I do in the world. I haven't figured out how to monetize any of it. And so right now, like I'm on the edge of moving back to Cincinnati because I can afford to live there and getting a job as a barista. Because with all the notoriety I've gathered as the humanist chaplain at USC and writing books and doing, like, I still haven't figured out how to get anybody to support the work or to pay for the work. And so when I look at you and see you actually, I think, putting really important messages into the universe. I mean, not just funny videos, but like the science stuff, which at this moment in our history, I can't think of anything really more important than trying to convince people that science is maybe a better way of understanding the world than Fox News. But like, so I feel really like, but you figured out a way to pump all these good messages out there and turn it into, like, succeed at doing that. I mean, I am incredibly successful at not making money while doing good things, and have been. Have been for 30 years. I have
several friends who are in your boat who just make remarkable, amazing things that when I consume their content or their message or whatever it is, I'm like, this is genius. This is so much better than anything I've ever done in terms of like its artistic value, in terms of its humor, and
it's an email to you that they sent to one person and they'll never send it to anyone else.
Or it's a blog that like only 60 people follow, or it's a YouTube channel that has an audience of 5,000, or it's a podcast that has like 500 really dedicated fans. And I think that is the vagary of the universe. I think that has nothing to do with the quality of work. I think that it has some to do with like what you value and what you're obsessed with. And so I think that it's very like getting rich is mostly a matter of luck, but there is another ingredient in getting rich, which is caring whether or not you get rich. Like wanting to get rich plus luck is what you need to get rich. Those are the only two things that matter.
Yeah. Wanting to get rich is necessary, but not sufficient. But it is necessary.
It does very occasionally happen to people who didn't want to get rich. It very rarely, it will occur, but it is hard to get rich if you don't want it pretty bad.
Yeah.
But possible. I've watched it happen, and it's very strange. And then the people are very like, I'm confused. I guess I'll just keep. But yeah, I've always valued money, and And so that is part of it, and I have no shame about that. I do have shame about it, but I am not going to hide it.
Yeah, and for me, when you just casually drop off that like, oh, I just finished a novel, and I see like the 8 other things that you're doing and the events that you're doing and all this stuff, I think like, oh my gosh, like, but I just finished watching the 2nd season of Catastrophe. It was so good. And I realized that the reason that I'm not producing anything is because there comes a moment in each day when my wife looks at me and says, hey, are you done? Sort of like, can we eat dinner and do something? And I always tell myself, tomorrow I will work harder, but I don't work. I don't work hard enough to do those things. Because
I disagree with you. I think so. It's not about working hard. It's about what you're trying. So it's about what you think a good idea is, and there's always a good idea is, I think, different to every person. And I think, like, to me, a good idea is something that is achievable with the tools that I have right now, that can be monetarily self-sustaining, and that hopefully is also good for the world. But like, for me, like, those first 2 things are like what a good idea is. And then I'm lucky enough to be in a situation where I have enough tools and enough money that I can mostly go after the ideas that are also good for the world, because I have like, if I just did all the ideas that I thought could be self-sustaining and that I had the tools to do, then I would be doing more stuff. But and I would be less happy. So my current capacity, like, is for just the things that also have this additional thing of like, I think that it's positive. You're gonna have a positive impact on people.
And that's the weird thing, like the good for the world thing. I realized that I wonder what you think when you say that phrase, good for the world, because I only ever think in terms of specific human beings that have sent me emails, or that I have to go visit, or that are college students that have come into my, like, it's all individuals. It's all like this little old lady I happen to know in Dubuque, Iowa, who I met there 20 years ago. And if I write to her or call her, it'll make a huge impact in her life. Mm-hmm. And so like, I think I'm always trying to pump out positive messages, but even like my podcast messages, like this podcast, the audience is small enough that like, I know most of them, or I feel like I know most of them. And so I think that people probably hear that in my voice. Like, I'm talking to my sister-in-law, Mary, and this guy I know in Detroit who's having a really hard time because his wife still believes in God and he doesn't know how to stay close to her. And like, I'm just talking to all these people, but the world, I have no concept, I have no concept of like what's positive for the world. I just know what's positive for this handful of relationships. And that really motivates me, but I think it keeps me from making anything of kind of that could go viral, because everything I do is too personal. And whereas I think what's your idea of when you say good for the world? Like, who's the world that you're trying to be good for?
Yeah. First, I want to say that I think the vast majority of good that is done in the world is done in that exact way. That really the good that gets done is person to person, human to human relationship thing, where, I help you get to the airport, or, you're having a hard, like, anywhere from like you need a ride to the airport to like your son has medical bills that you cannot pay and is going to die, or your son has died, and like, I'm there for you to help in whatever way. Like, that's the vast majority of good that gets done in the world.
Right.
And so all of these people, like, me or whoever else, you're looking at a people who have a much smaller impact on a much larger number of people. And that's really appealing to me, because for ego reasons, and also because it's easier to monetize, and also because I can. And I do think that if you can have a positive impact on a lot of people at the same time, then like at like 100%, like, yes. And I'm so like, I get so energized by the fact that that's possible for me. But there are also times where I absolutely say no to something that I think Bart Campolo could never say no to, because I'm just like, no, I can't do the high school graduation speech at the high school in my town. I can't go see, go to the teacher who does special ed in my school, who their students loves my videos so much. I can't go see them. I can't. I just like that one-on-one small scale stuff.
That's my whole schedule. That's my whole week. Is that not, is that stuff?
Yeah. So I say no to those things, and I didn't, and for a long time I said yes to them. But what would happen is every time I do one, I would leave having said yes to another.
Yeah.
Or at least one other, because like when you're in the room and they're like, hey, can you do this other thing? You're like, oh, of course I can do that. That's wonderful. I'd love to. But so like I have had to start saying no to absolutely everything, because I know that if I say yes to one thing, it will be yes to 5 things by the end of the month. And I feel really bad.
But you see,
it feels terrible.
But you see, here's what's funny is you feel bad about saying no to all those things. I feel guilty about having said yes to them. I look at my schedule at the end of the week and I think, another week gone, Bart, where you didn't do anything of enduring value, where you didn't do anything.
God, that's terrible. That's the worst thing I've ever heard.
No, where you didn't.
All of those things are of enduring value. Jesus Lord.
Oh, no.
Oh my God.
No, they are. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I know that they each crystal thing is of enduring value. But I look at my wife and I realize like, she's going to have to keep working at that job to support me because I didn't do anything that can make any money. Or also I think about 1,000 people somewhere that might have been helped by this message of making the most of your life by making meaning, by developing relationships, like the stuff that I pump out there. And I think like there are thousands of people that will never hear that message, because I had lunch with this guy who I had lunch with basically because he asked, and not because it wasn't strategic. It was just like he wanted my time and I couldn't say no to him. And so, and boy, when I do say no to somebody, I get they write me these letters going like, I thought you were a different kind of person. You've communicated, like, it's people don't let me off the hook easily, because and so I think that, and I guess maybe there's a message in here. Like, I'm thinking like, if you're listening to this conversation, if you're overhearing us, like, what do you go like, whatever you do, feel bad. But I think it's the other way around. I think that there need to be some people in the world who don't succeed on a large level because they're busy having lunch with people that like ask them. And I think that there are other people that need to not have lunch with people that ask them, so that they can put out messages about science or messages about goodness in a way that will reach lots and lots of people. And I mean, I know it's more lucrative to do the latter than the former, but I think that that's a side note, because, my guess is that even if I said no to everybody and tried to be a bigger deal, I suspect there's something sort of fun. Like, I suspect that there's some sort of instinctual thing that says, look, you can be really good on this one-on-one level, but you might not be as good. And I think maybe there's something instinctual about you that goes, maybe you're doing the most good you can do by keeping it by broadcasting, instead of, I don't know. But I get, when you reached out to me the first time, and and again, like, I spend no time on the internet. So I was completely I'm unaware of everybody. But when I then honed in and thought like, okay, who is this person? I was just so thrilled that you were pumping out that kind of content, because even the stuff that is just for fun, it's not mean.
It's possible.
And there's a lot of stuff out there that derives its fun from being mean to somebody.
Yeah.
And so like, I don't know. I'm not trying to blow smoke in your ear, but like, I'm going like, I think what you're doing is important. even though it makes you money.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do too. So thank you, but it's very nice to hear that from someone. Yeah. But I also don't think, like, I listened. The first thing I found of yours, it was my, you know, it was the thing where you were talking like sort of post election, and I was about to have a child, or I had just had a child, and I was just so despondent. It was a terrible moment.
Yeah.
And I was looking, and all I was seeing was like hot takes about what went wrong, or why whoever did a terrible job, or why America made this terrible decision. And then I listened to what you had to say, and I was like, thank you, someone, for responding to this in a way that isn't about anger, and is about like understanding and compassion, but without necessarily forgiveness. Because I think that people get those things confused, that they think compassion is forgiveness and that understanding is forgiveness. And it's like, oh, I understand why you did that, and thus it's okay. No, I can understand why you did a thing and also say like you are a damn fool.
Yeah. Or that forgiveness is absolution, which it is not.
Right.
Like, I forgive you, but what you did was wrong.
Right. Yes, this is also a very important point. And, which to be clear, I do not forgive yet Americans who have made this choice. But I think it is very important to understand them. Like, I think that without trying to understand a problem, like how are you going to solve a problem you don't understand? Like, you're just throwing stuff at the wall at that point. And you know, when it's all of us throwing stuff at the wall, then it's all going to cancel each other out. So I needed to hear that, and I was like, who is this guy? And then I looked you up, and I was like, oh, this has been, and I mean, I have a lot of affinity for a lot of what religion does, and I often feel like in the secular world, even in the science world, we suffer from a lack of a lot of what religion provides. And, you know, and that is like outlined by the fact that, you know, conservatives give more money to charity than liberals. And I'm like, that is a frustrating statistic for me. I feel like we are the compassionate branch of US politics, and we should be like, why on earth would we give more? And it's because we don't have organized institutions that tell us how to give. You know, and we're supposed to like all make those decisions separately and on our own and quietly, and instead of being like, here is the plate that you put money in once a week.
And that's exactly right. And the funny thing is that people know better than that about every other part of their life. They know that if they want to quit drinking, they can't just sit alone in a room and do that. They're going to have to get with a group. If they want to get in shape, they got to join a gym and be part of a group. They understand that like none of us are very good at living up to our most cherished values, that we need to sort of surround ourselves with people
That's so true.
that reinforce those values and underline them. And so that, you know, when I start to let down, you go like, hey, I thought we said we were going to, you know, eat healthy this month. And you're, oh yeah, damn it. And, you know, and that which is why smokers who are part of families that are smoking almost never can give up smoking. Or, you know, that there's this sense in which we are tribal. We are incredibly influenced by the people around us. And so you would think that a bunch of smart scientific people resolving that they wanted to live lives of moral depth and joy and excitement for goodness would go like, well, damn it, if I want to live by those values, I better find a group of people and institutionalize it. And they just, and we just don't. And so that
we can't. It's because I feel like one of the values is individualism. One of the values is every person is supposed to make their own choices, and every person is their own king, you know, is their own pope.
But here's the funny,
and like that value is so deeply ingrained in our society that it's like, individualism is great, and it has lots of advantages, and I think that it's done lots of good things for for our, for our whole world and our culture and individual people. But there's like, it also has drawbacks, and this feeling that we all have to figure it out on our own is a huge one, because man, is that hard.
Well, it's funny because I was thinking of Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish existentialist philosopher.
Of course you were.
And yes, of course I was. And Kierkegaard once said that it is only in the context of the group that an individual can emerge. That my individuality is only expressed and understood and when it's set against everybody else's. So in a sense, I find myself in relationship with everybody else. And so the idea that, well, I don't want to join a group because I want to do my own thing. I'm like, here's the funny thing is you won't be able to do your own thing unless you're part of the group. I'm thinking, in the sense, I have a friend who's a cook. And one time he said to me, he said, the one thing I've learned, Bart, is that if you want to cook, don't own your own restaurant. Because if you own your own restaurant, you'll never cook.
Yeah.
That you're too busy paying bills and ordering linens. And I think it's that same way to an individual. I go like, oh, you want to be an individual? Join a group. Because unless you join a group, you'll spend all your time doing things that you're not that good at. You need to be a part of a group where somebody else is good at that and that and that, and they just want you to do this thing that you're amazing at.
Yeah, but Bart, what if we disagree on some some very small topic that we can't resolve? Then how can I trust these people to be part of my group? I get that feeling sometimes where I'm working with people and I'm like, but that thing that you think isn't right. And I kind of don't want to do a show with you because you're wrong about that thing. And that's even more common when I'm working with people who are different from me, who have had different upbringings or are, not white dudes. I find that more frequently do I find little tiny things that I'm I'm not so sure about that. I don't really like that perspective, and thus I'm kind of maybe not going to want to work with you. And when I hit myself in the face because I'm such a stubborn and terrible person.
It's so interesting because I think that there's a certain kind of smart, science-oriented white guy, not to put too fine a point on it, but that...
Yeah, I know, I get it.
That cares too much about truth. That being right is too big a value compared to being kind or being together or that truth is more important than value. And so that they're willing to sacrifice value for truth. And I love ideas and I love arguing about ideas, but I have to tell you that ultimately the thing I value even more than truth, and anyone who's been around me and watched me lie will tell you this, is that I value love and loving relationships. And so in some sense, I would rather sacrifice being on the same page with you in terms of facts or perspectives. If we can stay, now there's a limit to that. There's a limit to that, but it's just sometimes I see these white science guys and I'm like, wow, being right is more important to you than being together. And
than being kind.
Yeah.
And I think that kindness is a really, and I have come to the conclusion that this is the example that I hit myself with over and over again. I have lots of friends who are super into astrology because I live in a pretty hippie town, and I know that astrology is super fake. And when my friends talk about their astrology readings, I am like, I need to find a way to listen to this conversation in a way that even when I'm being quiet, they can tell I'm judging them. And they can tell that I am imagining them in unkind ways, and so I have to find ways to understand, or so there's two things I could do: understand astrology in a way that allows me to just appreciate it for what it's doing for that person, and then appreciate it for that reason, or two, just give in and be like, it's okay, this isn't real, just like go with it and be like, this person is into this thing and tell me about what Mars was doing in Virgo and let's party about it. And
yeah, you kind of have to find a bemusement where you go like, wow, I cannot believe that is compelling to you, like.
I mean, yes, that is how I feel.
I cannot believe that's way of. But like, since it is, you got to tell me more about that. Like, like to explain that to me. But I think the thing is, like, I don't get angry anymore when people believe
I don't get mad about it.
No, but the thing is, like, but I also don't. I don't get contemptuous anymore, because if there's one thing, it's funny, like. The whole phrase, the free thinkers movement, I always laugh about free thinking, because I'm like, if there's anything that science has taught me, it's that there's no such thing as a free thought. Like, we're full of cognitive biases and heuristics. Like, why did I believe in God growing up? Like, that wasn't a choice, like, and so, when I see somebody who's believing in astrology, you sort of go like, wow, I do not understand that. But there must be something that brings you to that place. Like, why is that so appealing to you? And to recognize that it is appealing to them for some reason.
Right. Well, I think I get why it's appealing. Like, it's an opportunity to talk to somebody about like what you should do. It's just like, it's basically therapy, just unlicensed, which is fine. And like, I think astrologers.
No, it's not. It's worse than that. And the only reason you're saying that is because you're. The only reason you're saying that is because you're Sagittarius and you all think that way. It's not. Like, it can be really bad. Like people are locked into like original sin for Christianity. Like, it's a horrible doctrine. There
are bad ideas.
It's a bad idea. And so but the fact that a person has adopted a bad idea doesn't make them a bad person. And now, don't get me wrong. I can't be close to somebody who is really wrong about things that are really important to me. Like, I can be loving to them and I can be kind to them. And I can even be respectful and listen to them. But there comes a point at which intimacy, friendship intimacy, closeness, that's reserved for people who on some level share some really basic elements of the worldview. And that's why I don't think you can have like these Unitarian Universalist churches. I think there's only so close that a bunch of people with different worldviews can get to each other. And that's why I think secular people need to create communities. But when you say like, yeah, but what happens when you disagree? I'm like, there has to be a range of things at the center where you go, these are the things that we really do agree on. And that you kind of can't be part of this intimate circle if you don't agree on. But then there has to be, there has to be some wiggle room out there where you could just go like, wow, it is so fascinating that you like that. I tell me more. But I'm convinced that the most important aspect for this community building that secular people don't grasp is I think that they are afraid that by joining a group of people, some of whom don't agree with them, that they will have to give up their belief or give up their truth. And I just haven't found that to be the case. Like, I don't think those people have enough experience at being part of a community to understand that, like, lots of communities have lots of people that don't agree on lots of things, but what they do agree on is this thing in the center that defines the community. And I think loving, with all due respect, I think loving relationships and trying to make the world better for other people and cultivating a sense of gratitude for life, like, even if it's just those three things, like, that's enough to build a community around.
Except that we really just love to argue now. I mean, I've watched the internet start a culture war over basically straw men, and just imagining that other people are saying things that they aren't even saying.
Yeah,
some of them are, but it's a tiny minority. It could be like 150 people that have like built a culture war because we are so bad. We are so not built to communicate this way. And so when I think there are legitimate, interesting discussions that need to be had around social justice and how we make the world a more fair and equitable place. And
they're not going to be had those discussions are not. They're not going to happen on the internet. They're not going to happen on the internet.
What we had instead was like a reaction that basically got us Donald Trump as a president. Like there are young people who were so convinced by this backlash against social justice that they became like, I thought like it was this sad, super sad moment, as not a moment, but for over the last few years as I've watched this happen, where I have seen, like, I thought what was going to happen was that the people with these stodgy worldviews were just all going to die, and then we would have a new progressive world. And watching young people get swayed over into, I don't know, like the defense of the status quo and of whiteness and of maleness. It has been so sad.
You thought they would die out. You thought they would die out, and you didn't realize like that the internet had the ability to spawn new ones, to spawn young idiots.
Not just the internet, but in general, because like my experience with young people, like we are liberal, we are progressive, and that's and then like this whatever this backlash wave thing was, like, yes, there will continue to be people who are fighting for the status quo and feel as if they are being attacked by fairness. And of course I'm strawmanning myself right now, but
what if I told you, do you remember, I don't know if you ever read Marshall McLuhan or heard of him. He was big in the 70s. Woody Allen has a very funny scene in a movie where a guy is arguing about a movie and he goes and pulls Marshall McLuhan out. The guy's doing film criticism in line waiting for a movie, and Woody Allen, he's irritating the hell out of Woody Allen. And he goes and he grabs Marshall McLuhan and he brings him out and talks to him. But like at the time, he was a hugely famous intellectual who nobody remembers now. But he wrote a book called Understanding Media. And the big line from the book was, the medium is the message.
Sure.
That what's more important than what you're watching or listening to or participating in, it's the medium itself. And that some ideas, like that's why football took over, because football was a game for television. It's a perfect game for television. And baseball was a perfect game for radio. And so when the medium changed, what I would contend is that the kind of connections that nourish human souls are not, like, the medium of the internet is perfect for turning people into angry, divisive. Like the internet delivers you Donald Trump. It creates a context where a certain kind of conversation really does well, and another kind of conversation dies on the vine. And the kind of conversation that the internet facilitates is the one that will lead to a polarized country with Donald Trump as its president. And so you say, well, what's the answer? Are you like blow up the internet? And I don't think you can. But I think what you
also don't, please.
No, you'd be out of business. But I think that the question is to understand the implications of that medium and of the of your cell phones and all that stuff, and to understand that if you want to have a different kind of conversation, you're going to have to start using the internet as a tool to get you into a room with 100 other people that are really there, because you'll talk to them differently if they're in front of your face, and you'll argue differently if you see the way your words crush their spirit. And so that there's this sense in which, as human beings, the internet, we've taken a tool that was sort of meant to like get us together, and we've used it as the get together. We're like, it's almost like the wedding invitation becomes like the whole wedding. And you go, like, no, no, no. This was just, I'm sending you this to get you to the real party. And the real party is when we're together in a room together. And so what I'm convinced of is that the internet is going to crash us. And this way of consuming food and money and air travel and all this stuff, like, it's all unsustainable. But on the other side of it, I don't think all those things will go away. I think that people will realize that they have to be used more judiciously in the service of human relationships, because as human beings, that is what we are actually wired for. And so, I mean, I'm just convinced that the internet isn't a bad thing. I just think it's people thought it was everything, and they didn't realize that there's a certain kind of the most important kinds of conversations that need to happen for our tribe cannot happen on the internet.
So my counter argument is that right now we are experiencing the internet as it exists right now, and in a very real way. It's saying that the internet is a medium is almost like saying, radio waves are a medium. You can broadcast TV over radio waves. You can broadcast radio over radio waves. You can broadcast a cell phone conversation over radio waves. I think that the internet is a lot of different media. So like Facebook is different from Twitter, is different from Tumblr, is different from Vine, is different from YouTube. I think that I think it is. And then even like you look at something like Reddit, and you find places that are 100%. This is like the worst example of how the internet works. It's all, people who are all exactly the same as each other, holding up examples of how evil the people who disagree with them are. But another place on Reddit, another subreddit, could have a small community of people who, like I spend time on the subreddit for people who have ulcerative colitis, because I have ulcerative colitis, and it's just a supportive group of people who are like, we have this disease, and when somebody is going to the hospital to get surgery, we're like, good luck, man. And when somebody, gets their first day where they're, not pooping out of a hole in their stomach anymore, like, success, everything is great. And that exists for, for people who love a certain video game. It exists for people who, have had certain life experiences. And those, like, the internet is very, like, can be really good at creating small communities that could never have found a place in the real world because there just aren't enough of them. Like there are like, yeah. And so like there are all of these different media that are on the internet, and it can even be to the point of like different communities using this thing differently. It's so,
and that's what I'm trying to,
yeah.
I think we're saying the same thing in the sense of what I'm saying is that there are certain kinds of conversations that can only happen on the internet. You have a disease that only 1,000 people in the world have. The only community that you'll ever find will be on the internet. There's not enough of those people in Montana for you to ever get. So I go like, that's beautiful. You can have that kind of conversation only on the internet. But what's happened is that people are living an increasing amount of their lives on the internet, on their phones. They're actually at a party and they're on their phone checking out things elsewhere. And what I'm saying is that I think that they've taken this tool that is good for something, and they've tried to make it replace everything. And my counter argument is look at the world around you. And look at, like, in a sense, if somebody says to me, well, it remains to be seen. I say, well, when your house is half burned down, you can go like, I don't know if this fire is a good thing or a bad thing. Like, it remains to be seen. I go like, well, based on what I'm seeing here, I think I know that it's not a good thing. And what I would say is, or what I want to ask you, because you know this medium better than I do, is don't you come to a place, like even when you connect with your fans, which is a community, if you will, all by itself. And sometimes you get those fans together in person. And so don't you find that although it is powerful and amazing, it is also limited? I mean, can't you see the limits to what you can do and can't do with the internet in terms of changing another person's life for the better?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that when we do things in the real world, it is, people are often surprised by how much more it matters when they, meet the people who they have been talking to in comments, or, and we try to provide some, some opportunities for that to happen. It's not again, but like it's hard, and it's, like, because of the constraints of the real world, like it has to happen in a physical place, and it has to cost money, and I would love to figure out ways to make it cost less money. And I think like preachers have been very good at that, figuring out ways to do real world gatherings on the cheap, just throw up a tent in a parking lot kind of thing. Not that I necessarily want to live that life, but I do look to those places for models. But yeah, it definitely has constraints. And I do worry, especially because I think some people have had so much time to have social experiences on the internet that are very cultivated, that are careful, that aren't super stressful because they can disengage immediately if they want to. And that oftentimes are even really sort of, you can easily get drawn into sort of a dopamine spiral where it's like, I just want to like see the cute puppy or whatever it is that gets you going. And that there's not that same, you're not necessarily going to get that same experience in the real world. And also it's going to be more stressful. Like it might freak you out.
And that brings me around to where this conversation started out, coming back from Amsterdam, coming off the wedding, and sort of going like, in some ways, the thing that human beings are going to have to learn and teach each other and teach their children is how to come down, or how to resist that little dose of dopamine, how to defer gratification, how to have a phone and not pull it out, or how to program your phone so that it can only be used in a way that you can handle. That it's like alcohol, where the problem isn't alcohol itself. The problem is that some people don't have enough restraint or are susceptible to alcohol in certain ways. And the key is not to eliminate alcohol from the world. The key is to give people tools to cope with it. I'm boring you that bad, aren't I?
I have a 6-month-old child. There's lots of reasons I might yawn.
And so for me, that's one of the things where I think the future of humanizing people and of helping young people grow into happy, flourishing people is somehow not throwing the whole thing away.
Yeah. Because it is so valuable. Because
it's so
there's so many opportunities to connect with people who are outside of your sphere, and like never before has there been a chance where two people across the world can have an instantaneous conversation and both see each other's faces, and that technology is available even to people who have, not very much.
Yeah,
like
it's
all
amazing.
Of these things, like we need them so much.
And yet they're such amazing and wonderful tools. And yet the sum total is that people are less empathetic than they were 20 years ago. And more people are anxious and sad and depressed and discouraged. And when people go on Facebook to connect with their friends, they end up feeling more disconnected than they've ever felt. And so all of these things are not indictments of Facebook. They're not indictments of the internet. They are flags going up saying, hey, friends, we've got to really we got to really science this thing. It's like in that movie, The Mars thing, where I'm going to science the hell out of this thing. We have to science the hell out of this thing and sort of go, if our value is human flourishing rather than maximizing profits for a corporation, if our value is human flourishing, we've got to come up with a whole new way of teaching young people to handle this substance, this tool, this technology that could make their lives a lot better, but could also crash them, and is crashing so many of them. I mean, when you see the way it affects their sexuality, their friendships, their sense of personal identity, and their politics, my God, like you just go, we have got to teach these people how, like, it's like we've given every little child a Boeing 767 in flight and sort of gone like, figure it out. And we've got to start teaching people how to use this stuff. And that's where I guess that's why when you reached out to me, and this isn't a podcast conversation, this is just like you and me talking right at this moment. I'm like, the reason I was excited is because I feel like you have access to the tool. Like, you know how to use the tool. And you I felt like you were reaching out to me saying like, hey, we know there's something like wrong with the way people use these tools. And like, could you, like, you want to have a conversation about how we can make these tools, not how we can throw them away, but how we can make them actually help individual human beings flourish. And I guess, like, I feel like that's still the conversation I want to have, because I know better than to think this stuff is going to go away. But I also know that, like, at this wedding I'm at, my son and daughter, that some of their friends are there, and they're sucking up to all these friends of mine who are so relationally gifted. And they're going like, we don't know what it is about you people, but like, we want more of this. And like, this is the best party we've ever been to. And it's sort of like, yeah, there's this thing that you don't know. And we've got to figure out a way to help them both and, rather than either or. And that's where I feel like you and I are sort of the yin and yang of that both and.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And I have definitely been discouraged. And I think that we were so optimistic about what the internet was going to bring us. And it has brought us great things. Like, Wikipedia is amazing. It is such a tremendously useful resource that no one had access to. And that it was created entirely by just volunteer human beings. And there are many examples of things like that, none as large and dramatic, but whether that's collections of human knowledge or collections of human community. But man, it's funny. It's almost like it all went to hell when it got a little more diverse. Like, when people got access to the internet, who maybe, and also like who didn't have the tools to understand how it worked, and they got put on the internet, and then they were like, oh my God, I didn't know about all these things that were happening. And it's like, oh no, those are just inflammatory clickbait stories. You don't know about those? Oh, those are BS. Those aren't real. And they're like, but they don't know. It's like giving heroin to a group of people who have never heard of heroin. And they're like, oh, this is really fun. I like this. And you're like, oh God, don't do the heroin. Careful with that. Like, it's
exactly what happened with LSD. LSD is this amazing, all these psychedelics were doing amazing therapeutic things for people. And then they got out and people were like, here, just everybody, LSD is great. Like, and people, and all of a sudden then for 30 years, people were like, no, LSD, it's evil, because unrestrained, it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
You know, but like, if you talk to people that are using it responsibly now and that are experimenting with it, it's the most promising kind of stuff that's happening right now out there in the world of sort of medicine and overcoming trauma. But the internet and LSD are very similar in that you just can't throw them out there and say, it's really fun. Right. Take it out for a spin. So
yeah. So it's. Yeah, but also I think that, like, you know, it was such a happy, fun time when it was just all of the nerdy white guys, and we were like, everybody on the internet is wonderful, and it's like, well, it turns out that everybody on the internet is basically you, and that, like, you know, also some nerdy women and also some people of color, but like, there was an overwhelming demographic focus to the internet for its first like 15 years. Because it was nerds, and everything was wonderful, and it was just a bunch of nerds.
Because they all got along with each other.
When there were other people who had different worldviews, it was like, okay, everything's gone to hell, and I'm gonna just use this tool to shout, and you know, and like, I get that, because I was one of those nerds, and there were those glory days, and YouTube was the same way, where it used to be a lot of the same kinds of people doing a lot of the same kinds of things, and we all just sort of agreed with each other because we all came from similar backgrounds. And now it's very diverse, and there's lots of people doing things that are terrible, and people doing things that I'm like just completely uninterested in, but I'm sure are lovely. But I would never like deny access to these tools to those people just because it made it more complicated. But we do have to find ways to coexist. It's like a weird like coexisting in this nation of people that is international and that has like opportunity for direct touch, but mostly exists inside of these little bubbles. And so when the bubbles like brush up against each other, then there's suddenly these giant sparks and flames and gasoline fires that occur.
So let me ask you a question.
I don't know. Yes, please don't be. Please let the question not be, how do we fix it?
No, here's my question is,
okay.
Again, like, I don't think you fix it. I think you teach yourself how to like, you can't fix the ocean, but you can teach yourself how to be a better sailor. And I guess my question is there anything like, you live in that world? And on the one hand, I go like, well, you're obviously not that great a sailor because like at the beginning of this conversation, you were totally bummed out. But I think in general, I feel like you do sail pretty well. And so I got a bunch of people out there and they're hearing me go all apocalyptic. The internet is dangerous. And you know, and you're like, what do you know about sailing? Like, what have you learned in your years? And what have you learned by watching other people, about like how to filter out fake news or how to recognize bad tendencies, or how, what do you know that can help me make more of my life in the internet?
I think a big one is that you get like, unlike the ocean, when you're sailing on it, doesn't matter how angry you are, the ocean is going to be the ocean. But what you put into the internet comes back to you. And so if you put rage and flames and energy in that way out into the internet, it's going to come back to you in the same way. And if you are calm and respectful and thoughtful and you think about people complexly, then the majority of what comes back to you will be those kinds of things. That's not all that will come back. There will always be people who will, we just made a video on SciShow recently where we used like, language that recognized the existence of transgender people, and just us saying words those ways made people feel like they were being attacked by us because they have become so convinced that that language policing is the downfall of Western civilization, whatever that is. And so you catch those things, and I think you catch them more if you're if you are not a white dude, if you are a person of color, if you're a woman, you catch those things more than if you're the sort of default human as far as our culture is concerned.
So you catch more more pain, you catch more unsolicited anger.
But there is definitely an amount of like, if you are making content that is like destructive and you're like, whatever, everything, like people are, then you're gonna like you are going to have a frustrating time.
And that's going to come back to you.
And as far as like, it's interesting because I feel like I have a responsibility because I have a large audience, and so there will oftentimes be things I will see where I'm like, that looks like it might not be real. I'm going to check first. Or or more recently, it's been like, if I'm going to share this thing, is it going to make my life better? Is it going to make the people who see it? Is it going to make their lives better? Is it going to energize them to do something productive and positive, or is it just going to make them feel more angry and put more weight on their shoulders,
more helpless sometimes? Yeah.
And so I have attempted to think about that with every sort of piece of media I'm putting out there. And I think that if everybody thought about it that way, that would be fantastic, because I think the internet would be a more productive place. So if everybody sort of considered the impact that their words and their, like, it's almost like people don't know their own power. I think that this is a huge problem that we generally have in America. Like you are unaware of how powerful you are as an American, and how much impact you have on the world and on other people, and like how important our vote is, not just to us but to the rest of the world. I think that it.
Well, I just
a recognition of the amount of power that we have would help a lot of people.
I just realized something listening to you that I think, because I think that the things that you put out are of such good quality, and I realized, like, oh, wait a second, you're not doing it alone. Like, you're having before you put many of the things you put out there, don't go out there until you've had a conversation with your brother or with somebody else in your company. Like, you're not just a guy in the basement putting out content. You're part of a team. And I wonder if people in the real world, like, just if they called somebody on the phone and said, I'm thinking of posting this. What do you like, let me show this to you. Like, so much of the damage gets done because there's nobody saying, well, what are you trying to do with that? Like, how is that going to make anybody's life better? Like, what do you think will happen if you put that out there? Like, let's just, well, when I read that, it kind of reads angry to me. If you change that word, it's okay. Like, I think about all the editing that I do when I'm putting together a talk, and my wife is there, and I'm like, I'm going to say this. And she goes, oh, listen, don't you know what that image suggests? And, and isn't that what you do? Like, you're not just putting stuff out there all by yourself, even though it's in your name.
Yeah, I was walking out of the gym yesterday, and I thought to myself, how long, if I had been doing this on my own, how long would it have taken for my YouTube channel to become 100% like Marxist propaganda? Just like railing against the financial system and like the stuff that really pisses me off in modern society, where like the financialization and how greed runs everything in America. Like, how long would it have taken if John wasn't there to be my, like, to
temper you,
to temper me, and also to like be that person when I like write a script that I know is a little bit on the edge, be like, John, is this okay? Like, I'm sharing this with you. I don't want to do a thing with our thing that isn't all right with you. And it's like, I think I would have devolved so far into angry, and also, in response, and I think a lot of what it is it's in response to people who come at you. You're like, oh, I have to, to almost like, I have to make it hotter because they're making it hot.
Yeah. No,
and
this is brilliant. Like this may be the most important thing that I'm getting from you. Because like, I'm thinking, no, listen to me. Because like, one of the things that is very known about me is I have a very recognizable personal brand. Like what people go like, oh, what would Bart do? They know what Bart would do. What would Bart say? But they know. Like I'm a caricature of myself. And so, but like, that's cultivated. And so what happens to me sometimes is like, and I actually did a podcast a few months ago where somebody wrote me an email and I was going to send them something that was mean. And one of my students was like, dude, that's not your brand. That's not who you are.
That's off brand, dude.
Don't send that. And they were right. And I pulled it back and I didn't send it. I sent something different. And I ended up in having this wonderful encounter with this person. To your point about what you put out there is what you'll get back. I put out warmth, and I got back warmth from somebody who, was prone to dislike me. But what I realized is she was protecting out my brand because she knows my brand and she cares about my brand. And I wonder how many people we need to almost do a buddy system where we go like, I'm still me on the internet and you're still you, but like, I'm going to run everything by you because you're here to protect my brand, and I'm here to protect yours because our brands are sort of similar. But like, I think that if people had one other human being that they had to actually interact with before they broadcast stuff, I think it would change everything.
But you're imagining the internet in a way it doesn't work, where like I wait more than 13 seconds before I tweet something. Like, I don't run a tweet by John, but I will do that with scripts occasionally. But with a tweet, I won't run it by John. But I do kind of think about what he might think.
Well, and so like, and you know what he might think because you've talked with him a lot about your personal brand, your angle,
so
what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be
some kind of, it doesn't, not like every time, but having some person that you talk to regularly about this stuff is absolutely valid. And I think that might be part of why so many of the really, not just popular, but also like not, not like reactive things on the internet, like productive things instead of reactive things, are teams, small teams of people who trust each other. Yeah. Usually two people.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, I'm thinking like, if you just had a person that every week you got together and said like, now what are you trying to do with your social media? Like what are you worried about in the world? What are the things you're trying to put out there? Let's review some of the stuff that you put out last week. Let's talk about how we could, because you're going to use the same language again 2 weeks from now. Like that. Yeah. I think if people were talking to each other about their messaging to a real human being, their messaging would get better almost within a week. Within 2 weeks, their messaging would get better. And then they would be putting out better stuff and they would be getting back better stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's putting together that kind of support group is very appealing to me. I feel like hard in practice. I just, I think some people do have that. I'm thinking about a particular person right now who tweeted something this morning that I thought was, he's been, in the middle of a lot of controversy, and people think that his perspectives are not what his perspectives are. Mostly he's just trying to have a good time and have fun, but also he's like trying to be a little bit irreverent and be a little bit like, all of this stuff, it's just like hullabaloo and none of it matters, and people are trying to make big deals out of stuff that isn't big deals. And that kind of perspective, which oftentimes is like, oh my God, I was just trying to say something and you're attacking me for using this word, when it's not like, I'm not trying to be offensive with the word, and like stop trying to like make everything into an issue kind of perspective, which like I get it. It can be really frustrating, especially when you have a large audience and people are always coming at you. But he tweeted something this morning that was clearly like meant to rile up his haters, but it also was kind of a gross thing that the people he disagrees with and that his haters think that he is would post. And so like he's turning into the thing that his haters think he is, because he's just reacting to them and he's so frustrated by them. And I'm projecting all of this because I don't even know him that well, but I'm like, dude, don't like, just take a step back and not like, if you want to get up in their business, love what you do, have a good time doing it, have fun, but also try to be a little bit better.
And I bet that was that tweet proactive or reactive? Because I'll bet like he didn't need to send it out there. It was apropos of nothing, right?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, it was no, absolutely. It didn't. No, it absolutely did not need to be there. And I almost responded to him with like, dude, what the fuck? Like I almost did publicly, because that's what you do, because you're always creating content as a content creator. And I'm saying like, well, like it's time for me to create some content, and this is my content for the day. I'm going to get an argument with a guy on the internet, and so instead I just sent him a message. Oh, and I was like,
I love you, I love you, because that's what I would have done. I would have said like, don't send him something publicly. Call him up and say, hey man,
yeah,
I'm with you. I'm rooting for you. I think you can be more effective if you do it this way. But my gosh, think about it. Like, he didn't need to send that out. So wouldn't it be great if that guy had a partner and they were talking and going like, what are you going to do this? What do you think needs to be said this week? He said, well, I think I really need to like give a big fuck you to everybody. And this is how I want to do it. And his partner said, listen, man, I know what you're trying to do overall, that's just going to take you off message. So like, how about this? And I swear to you, I think that 50% of the bad mojo that's out there would be avoided if somebody had just somebody to talk to not each tweet. You're right. I'm not, but just somebody who they were regularly sort of saying, you help me with my brand. I'll help you with your brand. And this is not like people that are monetizing. This is just like my aunt, my Aunt Mary. Like, she has a brand too. Her Facebook page is a brand, and the way she responds to other people, and just to go like, hey, tell me about your week on the internet this week. And let's talk about like, is that really who you want to be? And where did you get the biggest positives? And where did you get the biggest negatives? And let's see how we can tweak these messages so that you're sending, because, every secular humanist has a responsibility to be putting out messages that help educate the rest of the world that goodness in a secular way is positive and is possible and fun and joyful. Like, there are people that are trapped in crazy Christian prisons because they don't think there's any other way to be a good person. And so if a humanist hones their message in such a way so that they show somebody this, they could actually be liberating another human being into a better way of life. And so it's important, even if it's just you responding to your Aunt Sally's wedding pictures, it's important for you to just stop. And I don't think any of us have those conversations unless we're having them with another human being.
Right. And so the only feedback we get is the numbers. And so what we see is what does well, what gets the most likes, what gets the most shares. And that like sort of thoughtless, I'm having this impact, people are liking what I'm doing, but it is disconnected from the reality of the impact it's having, where people are sharing it because whether people are sharing it because they felt good or because they felt bad, is completely removed from the equation. And it is actually much easier to get people sharing something because it made them feel bad. It made them feel angry.
One of the big questions I ask the college students is, at the end of this thing, like, how are you keeping score? And so for you as an internet provider, like, one way of keeping score is how many views or how much money comes in, but like, on some level, like with my podcast, at least one of the ways I keep score is I look at actual emails from somebody who says, I heard this podcast and it made me do this. I mean, I had this experience a few months ago where a guy wrote and he said, I heard you do this podcast about this life being the only one you have and making the most of it. And about relationships. And he said, and I reached out to my sister who I hadn't talked to for 10 years, and we connected and we reconciled some stuff. We started talking. And then like last week, she dropped dead unexpectedly of a heart attack. And he said, if I hadn't listened to you, I wouldn't have reconnected. And he said, I'm grieving my sister, but he said she died and we were connected when she died. And he said, it made that podcast made a huge difference. And I sort of go like, okay, I don't know how many views it got or how many listens. I don't care. Like, if it got enough listens to get to that guy, like, that's just a different way of keeping score. And I think that one of the things that people, especially with you have to balance out both those ways of keeping score. In a sense, like, if you don't have numbers, you can't keep putting out your messages. But if numbers are the only thing you're looking for, you're going to put out shit messages. And so you've got to balance out, like, I want quantity so that I can keep doing this good work. But I want to have stories, or I want to know how it's actually touching individual lives, because otherwise, like, it's really just for the money, and that's not who I want to be. And again, like, for the average person listening to this podcast, they're not talking about money, but it's still click, it's still like number of likes, number of listens. Like, people care about they just care about the impact that they're having out there. And somehow we've got to sort of train ourselves to go like, there's two kinds of impact, and at different times they're both important. But I mean, you must have, I know that when you go out and do these on the road things, you're having actual people come up and tell you like, this is how this video changed my perspective, or this is how this helped me to have a better relationship with this person because I figured this stuff out. And, you know, I think like you got to weigh that in.
Yeah.
I know.
I think the question, how are you keeping score, is a question that every person should be asking themselves, right? Because I think we all do it. And I think that that successful internet platforms have in part become successful because they allow you to keep score in a very tangible way. And there is a psychological boost that we get when our score goes up. And that's actually pretty creepy.
Yep. And that's
what's pushing.
Yeah, that's really good. And here's the thing, like, I have a feeling, I don't know your brother, but I know you, I sense you like your brother.
Yeah, I like my brother.
And so here's the thing, what I think is there might be a decision that you have to make that would get you 1,000 or 10,000 more hits. But if you say something, if you say, I'm thinking about doing this, and your brother comes back and says, like, I don't know, like, where's that going? Like, what about this? I think like his actual face-to-face approval is a different way of keeping score, and it matters to you. Yeah. And so that's the thing. Like, I think if you have a human being who you respect and admire in your life talking to you about what you're doing online, you're way more likely to be able to resist the temptation of the numbers.
Yeah, and this is the thing that I would also say to people who run businesses. Watch out for anything that's going to change the way that you keep score, which is what, it's what, a new client can do to you. It's what an investor can do to you. It's what, a tight situation can do. And so if you, and if you lose track of the original reason why you're doing something, whether that's business or whether it's a relationship or whatever it is, then like, and it stops feeling good and right, and it starts feeling like you're doing it.
Yeah.
For the grosser reason. Yeah.
Well, we got to go back to life. But this idea of how do you keep score that we sort of end up with, and how do you, and again, like coming back to the community thing of it's great to make a resolution of like, this is what matters to me. This is how I'm going to keep score. But what I'm telling you is like, none of us live up to our highest values unless we're surrounded by people that affirm those values and reinforce them and hold us to them when we are weak. This is good.
Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate this conversation a lot. And I especially appreciate that last part of it because I really do. Like,
that was really interesting.
I'm sort of obsessed with how do we actually help people, not just like the internet's really dangerous and bad things are happening, but like, how do you give people tools to move forward? And I guess I feel like that's thinking about you and your brother. All of a sudden I was like, of course he puts out better stuff than most people. He's not alone.
Yeah, that helps.
So if nothing else, you should call your brother this morning and say to him, you're wonderful. I love you, and I'm glad you're in my life, or something like that.
I should. Yeah, I should. I don't do that enough.
All right, so that was my conversation with Hank Green. I hope you liked it. Most of you probably didn't make it this far. Actually, if you're listening, you did make it this far, but most of the people that started that podcast probably didn't make it this far. But for those of you who did, you deserve a gold star. No, better still, you deserve a little excerpt from Robert Ingersoll. So here you go. This is again from Ingersoll the Magnificent. And I'm gonna, Robert Ingersoll wrote in the 1890s. And so it was all about men. Even though he loved women, he just used masculine pronouns for everything. So I'm going to try to switch this up to make it a little more inclusive, but I think you'll get the idea. Here's Robert Ingersoll. I want you to go away with an eternal hatred in your breast of injustice, of aristocracy, of caste, of the idea that one person has more rights than another because he has better clothes, more land, more money, because she owns a railroad or is famous and in high position. Remember that all people have equal rights. Remember that the person who acts best his part who loves her friends the best, is most willing to help others, truest in the discharge of obligation, who has the best heart, the most feeling, the deepest sympathies, and who freely gives others the rights that he claims for himself, is the best person. I am willing to swear to this. Well, I am too, Robert. I am willing to swear to it. It's all about humanizing ourselves. That's why we're here. That's why I love you for hanging with me. I'd love to hear from you. Write to me at bartcampolo.org. But until we connect again, stay wonderful.
For more information about the work of Bart Campolo, please visit bartcampolo.org.